So now we know that just define energy as the ability to do work, or energy is the ability to make something move, or make something happen, or the ability to do work, since work is only accomplished if a force is used or something moves. So here's what we want to do next. Draw a line up the last thing you've written, and I know you've studied energy some before, but what I want you to do now is make a list of the many different kinds of energy that you know about. Any kind of energy you can think of, I want you to write it down on a list. Press pause while you do this, and then start the video again when you're done. So what kinds did you come up with? Now, what you need to do next is pause the video, come find Miss Ewing, and ask to see the class list, so you can look at what we came up with as a class. You probably saw from the class list that we had a lot of things on there, and you may have seen some things on the list that you didn't agree with. One of the things we discussed in class was that there are actually only 7 different kinds of energy, and you saw by the class list that we had way more than 7. So that must mean that some of the things on the list aren't really one of the 7 kinds. Some of the things on the list were actually sources of energy, and then some of them were things that used energy, and then some of the things on the list were synonyms for the same type of energy. A couple of the groups had a couple of the words that I want to talk about next. Before we get into the different kinds of energy, I want to talk about state. When we were studying matter, you learned that matter can exist in one of 3 states: solid, liquid, or gas, or plasma. But remember, you're not supposed to know that yet, right? And energy is sort of the same way. No matter what kind of energy you have, all energy can only exist in 2 states. Oops. So no matter what kind of energy it is, electric energy or heat energy, it all can be described as being in one of these 2 states. You might have heard of them. It can either be described as potential or kinetic. Now we're going to talk about each of these, but go ahead in your notes and write this down. All energy exists in one of 2 states, either potential or kinetic. Now that you've written this in your notes, I want to talk to you about the first word, potential. You've probably heard this word before. In fact, I hear teachers and coaches say it a lot about other kids. Sometimes we'll be talking about some of the students in our classes, and I'll say something like, "Oh, that kid has a lot of potential." What does it mean when a teacher or coach says a student or a player has lots of potential? One of the things that we mean when we say that is that that person has the talent or the resources that they need to really become a certain thing, to really be great, except that they're not using it yet. Sometimes parents will complain that a kid's not living up to his or her potential. That means they have the talent to be really something really amazing, but either they're not using it or they're just not developing it yet. You know, if something's already being used, we don't say that it has potential because it's already being used. For example, Peyton Manning. No one would ever say now that Peyton Manning has the potential to be a great football player or a great quarterback. Why wouldn't anybody say that Peyton Manning has potential to be a great quarterback? Right, he's already a great quarterback, one of the best that's ever played the game. Now maybe when Peyton Manning was a little 6-year-old kid in Pee Wee football, probably some coach or parent said, "Man, that kid's got an arm on him. He's got the potential to be a great football player, a great quarterback." So once the person starts using those resources and starts developing them and living up to all that they could possibly be, we don't say they have potential. They're living up to that potential. They've already fulfilled it. So let's take this and talk about energy. One of the things that we can do is, just like having talent or resources to do something, it's there and we're not using it. Energy is the same way. We can have energy that's there, but we're not using it yet. It's stored up, waiting to be used. Now, when we say it's stored, what does that mean, stored? In fact, why do people store things? For example, after Christmas, I stored the Christmas ornaments from our Christmas tree. Why didn't I just throw them out? Yes, when people store things, the reason they store them is so that they can use them later. Energy is the same way. We want to store energy, or we're able to store energy so it can be used later. But once the energy starts being used, we don't call it potential anymore. We say it's kinetic. So what we're really going to do is talk about the difference between potential and kinetic. On TCAP, you're supposed to know the difference between these two, and it's very easy to tell the difference. But they're going to ask you some harder questions, specifically about potential energy, how you have to compare the different amounts and what things can cause it. So I want to spend a lot of time just on potential energy first, and then we'll go to kinetic. Now, since they're going to ask so much about potential energy, I want to devote a whole page of just writing down information about what we mean when we say potential energy. Remember, we said potential energy is energy that's stored. And we're going to make a box and T-chart, and it's going to need to be on its own page. So go to the next clean page, and you're going to be making a box and T-chart. And we want it to look like this. The box at the top needs to be about 5 lines high. We're going to write 5 things, and each of them should fit on a line. The T-chart underneath should go the rest of the length of the page. At the top, put potential energy. Now, this first information is going to go just in the top of the box. In the top of the box, I want to put some brief definitions for potential energy, a couple ways you might see it defined on TCAP, and then also the 2 ways that you can give objects potential energy. So this all goes in the box. Now, potential energy, and it's the definition. One way to describe it, it's just energy that's stored. A good example of potential energy is a battery. I know you've used batteries before, and you know that you can use them to power electric devices. And inside the battery, we have electrons that flow out of a pace from one end of the battery back to the other end. So that's stored up energy, and it should stay there until we use it. Another way to describe potential energy is energy that hasn't been used yet. Now, you should be writing all this in the box. If you need more time, you can pause the video and restart it when you're ready. Now, there are 2 causes or 2 ways that potential energy can be stored in an object. One is from what we call an object's position, where it's located. And then the other one is something we call an object's condition. And that means how it's made. We're going to talk about each of these in depth. Pause the video and then restart it when you're ready to go on.